The silver burned through Marcus Blackwood's wrists like molten fire, but not nearly enough to quiet the beast clawing at his ribs. He'd been chained to his mahogany desk for 6 hours now, the custom restraints he'd commissioned from a specialty metalworker biting deeper with every unconscious tug. The wolfsbane tea had gone cold hours ago, leaving a bitter film on his tongue that mixed poorly with the Macallan he'd been nursing since dawn. Outside his corner office windows, Seattle's skyline glittered in the pre-midnight darkness, and somewhere out there, his empire of tech startups and real estate ventures continued generating money he no longer cared to count. Marcus pressed his forehead against the desk's cool surface and tried to remember what it felt like to be human. The effort sent another wave of nausea rolling through him, and he dry-heaved into the crystal tumbler beside his laptop. 3 months ago, he'd nearly torn apart half the board of directors during what should have been a routine quarterly meeting. The memory came in flashes: Johnson's terrified face, the conference table splintering under claws, the taste of copper flooding his mouth. They'd written it off as a psychotic break brought on by his divorce. The NDAs he'd forced them to sign ensured their silence, but Marcus knew the truth was far worse than corporate stress. He was losing control. Had been losing it since Helena's final, masterful play. The custody hearing should have been routine. Marcus had the better lawyers, the cleaner financial records, the stable home environment. But Helena had always been 3 moves ahead, even when they'd been happy. Even when he'd foolishly believed she loved him despite knowing what he was. She'd triggered his transformation right there in family court, cameras rolling, their 7-year-old daughter watching from the gallery. The wolfsbane suppressants Helena had been secretly replacing with sugar pills for weeks meant he never saw it coming. One moment he'd been cross-examining her character witness, the next, he was shifting in front of a judge, 2 bailiffs, and a room full of people who would never look at Lily the same way again. The footage had gone viral before he'd finished shifting back. Helena had disappeared with Lily that same night. New identities, federal witness protection, the works. His PI had tracked them to 3 different states before the trail went cold somewhere in Montana. Or maybe it was Wyoming. After a while, the expensive reports all blurred together into the same devastating truth: his daughter was gone, and he'd never see her again. Marcus lifted his head, silver restraints clinking, and reached for the wolfsbane extract he kept in his bottom drawer. The bottle was nearly empty, which meant another call to his supplier in Portland. The guy thought Marcus was using it for gardening. He unscrewed the cap with shaking fingers and drank directly from the bottle. The liquid burned worse than the whiskey, worse than the silver, but it was the only thing that kept the wolf from breaking free and finishing what it had started in that boardroom. These days, Marcus survived on a careful cocktail of toxins, each one designed to make him too weak to shift, too sick to care. The office door's electronic lock beeped, followed by the soft wheeze of the pneumatic hinges. Marcus didn't bother looking up. His night security knew not to disturb him after hours, which meant it was either his assistant coming to fire herself, the 5th one this quarter, or someone with a death wish. Jesus fucking Christ. The voice was unfamiliar, pitched low with a slight rasp that suggested too many cigarettes or not enough sleep. Marcus raised his head and found himself looking at someone he'd never seen before: Asian features, short dark hair sticking up like they'd been running their hands through it, and the navy blue uniform of Emerald City Cleaning Services. They were staring at him with an expression caught somewhere between disgust and clinical assessment. "Let me guess," the cleaner said, setting down a wheeled cart full of supplies. "Tech bro midlife crisis? Crypto crash got you chained to your desk like some kind of performance art piece?" Marcus tried to speak and discovered his throat had closed up. The wolfsbane was hitting harder tonight, or maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe his body was finally deciding to quit on him entirely. He managed a weak cough that brought up more bile. "Oh, for fuck's sake." The cleaner moved closer, wrinkling their nose. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't liquid?" They were close enough now that Marcus could smell them: industrial soap, coffee, and something else, something wild and sharp that made the wolf in his chest stir despite the chemical suppressants. His vision blurred, and he slumped forward, silver restraints the only thing keeping him upright. "Hey, stay with me, Richie Rich." A hand touched his forehead, surprisingly gentle. "You're burning up. And these restraints. The cleaner's voice trailed off, and Marcus felt them examining the silver cuffs around his wrists. What kind of kinky shit is this? These are real silver. This is going to leave scars. Marcus tried to pull away and nearly blacked out from the effort. His last coherent thought was that he was about to die in front of a stranger who thought he was just another Silicon Valley burnout with expensive fetishes. The next thing he knew, freezing water was hitting him from all directions. Wake up, sleeping beauty. Marcus sputtered and thrashed, only to realize he was sitting on the floor of his office bathroom, fully clothed, with the shower running over him. The cleaner, he still didn't know their name, was standing outside the glass enclosure, arms crossed, expression unimpressed. What? Marcus's voice came out as a croak. What are you doing? Preventing you from dying on my shift, they said matter-of-factly. Do you have any idea how much paperwork that would involve? I've got 3 other buildings to clean tonight. The cold water was helping clear his head, but Marcus could feel the silver burns on his wrists throbbing in time with his heartbeat. The restraints were still locked around his wrists, though somehow the cleaner had detached them from his desk chair. The keys, Marcus managed. Bottom drawer, red box. The cleaner disappeared and returned a moment later with the keys, stepping into the shower without bothering to remove their shoes. This is probably going to hurt. They were right. Marcus bit down on a scream as the silver cuffs came off, leaving behind raw, blistered skin that would take weeks to heal properly. The cleaner examined the wounds with professional detachment. You need a hospital, they said. No. Marcus grabbed their wrist, probably harder than he should have. Even weakened, he was still stronger than most humans. No hospitals. No doctors. No one else can know about this. The cleaner looked down at his hand on their wrist, then back up at his face. Something shifted in their expression, not fear, exactly, but a new kind of wariness. Okay, they said slowly. But you're going to tell me what's really going on here. Because this? They gestured at the silver cuffs, the bathroom, his soaked suit. This isn't just a bad breakup and too much whiskey. This is some next-level self-destruction, and I'm not cleaning up your corpse without knowing why. Marcus released their wrist and slumped back against the shower wall. The water was still running, plastering his hair to his skull, and he could taste blood where he'd bitten his tongue. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, he said. The cleaner, he really needed to learn their name, tilted their head and studied him with dark, intelligent eyes. Try me, they said. I've seen some shit working nights in this city. Rich guys chained to their desks with silver restraints barely makes the top 10. Despite everything, the pain, the nausea, the crushing weight of loss that had been his only companion for months, Marcus found himself almost smiling. What's your name? He asked. Sage Chen, they said. And you're Marcus Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, recently divorced, and apparently determined to poison yourself to death in your office. Now stop deflecting and start talking. Marcus closed his eyes and let the water run over his face. In 3 months, no one had asked him directly what was wrong. His lawyers, his doctors, his remaining business associates, they all danced around the obvious question, too professional or too scared to push for real answers. Sage Chen, night cleaner with a mouth like a sailor and zero sense of self-preservation, was the first person who'd looked at his situation and demanded the truth. The wolf in his chest stirred again, responding to something he couldn't name. Marcus opened his eyes and met Sage's steady gaze. You're right, he said. It's not just a bad breakup. He took a shaky breath, tasting wolfsbane and regret. My ex-wife didn't just leave me. She destroyed my life, took my daughter, and made sure I can never see either of them again. And the worst part? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. She was right to do it. Because I'm exactly the monster she always said I was. Sage's expression didn't change. They reached over and turned off the shower, then grabbed a towel from the rack and handed it to him. Okay, they said. We're going to need coffee for this conversation. And probably something stronger than coffee. But first, let's get you dried off before you catch pneumonia and really ruin my night. Marcus stared at them, water dripping from his soaked clothes onto the marble floor. "You're not going to run?" he asked. Sage shrugged. "Where am I going to go? I've got 4 more hours on my shift, and something tells me your story is going to be a lot more interesting than scrubbing toilets." They paused at the bathroom door and looked back at him. "Besides," Sage said, "I meant what I said earlier. You're not dying on my watch. Whatever kind of monster you think you are, you're going to have to get in line behind the rent, my student loans, and my complete lack of patience for rich guys' guilt complexes." And with that, Sage Chen walked out of the bathroom, leaving Marcus alone with the towel and the strangest feeling that his life had just taken a turn he hadn't seen coming. For the first time in months, the wolf in his chest was quiet. Chapter 2. The tea appeared on Marcus's desk 3 nights later without explanation or fanfare, a simple white mug with steam curling from its surface, sitting exactly where his crystal tumbler of wolfsbane and whiskey usually waited. Marcus stared at it for a full 5 minutes before touching the handle. The porcelain was warm, and when he inhaled, he caught notes of chamomile, mint, and something else he couldn't identify. Something green and bitter that made his sinuses clear for the first time in weeks. He was alone in his office. The cleaning schedule he'd memorized showed Sage wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. Yet here was tea, precisely brewed and perfectly timed to his evening routine. Marcus lifted the mug and took a cautious sip. The liquid was hot enough to burn his tongue, but underneath the initial heat was a complexity that made his chest loosen. For the first time since Helena's betrayal, he could breathe without feeling like his lungs were full of glass. He drank the entire cup. By the time Sage arrived at midnight, wheeling their cart through the executive floor with the same bored efficiency as always, Marcus felt almost human. The constant nausea had receded, and the tremor in his hands had steadied. He watched through his office's one-way glass as Sage moved through the cubicles, methodically emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces. They didn't look toward his office once, but somehow Marcus knew they were aware of him watching. The next night, there was tea again. This time it tasted of ginger and something sharp that made his sinuses tingle. Marcus found himself looking forward to it, timing his arrival to coincide with its mysterious appearance. He started staying later than necessary, no longer chained to his desk but somehow unable to leave until after Sage finished their shift. A week passed before Marcus realized what was happening. The constant fog in his head was clearing, his appetite was returning, and the silver burns on his wrists were healing faster than they should have. Sage wasn't just leaving him tea out of misguided kindness. They were deliberately counteracting the wolfsbane poisoning he'd been inflicting on himself. The realization should have made him furious. Instead, Marcus found himself fascinated. He pulled up the building's security system on his laptop and began studying the feeds more carefully. 24 cameras covered the executive floor, and Marcus had administrative access to all of them. What had started as casual observation became something far more intensive. Sage Chen was methodical in ways that bordered on ritualistic. They always started with the northeast corner offices, working counterclockwise through the floor. They spent exactly 3 minutes in each standard office, 7 minutes in the conference rooms, and never more than 30 seconds in the break areas. Their movements were economical, practiced, but Marcus began noticing small deviations. The way Sage lingered near certain windows, always the ones facing south toward the sound. How they checked their phone exactly every 47 minutes, glancing at the screen with an expression Marcus couldn't read through the grainy camera feed. The careful way they handled anything that looked expensive, as if they understood exactly how much each item cost and what breaking it would mean. Marcus started leaving tests. Nothing obvious at first, just small obstacles that might trip up a careless cleaner. A chair pulled slightly away from a desk, creating a narrow passage. A stack of papers positioned to fall if bumped. A pen balanced precariously on a windowsill. Sage navigated them all without breaking stride. Marcus escalated. A small puddle of water near an electrical outlet. A shard of glass from a broken picture frame hidden under a desk. A chemical spill in the supply closet that any normal person would have called hazmat to handle. Sage cleaned around the water with professional precision. Swept up the glass without cutting themselves. neutralized the chemical spill with a combination of supplies from their cart that demonstrated knowledge far beyond basic janitorial training. Each night became a twisted game. Marcus would spend his days planning increasingly complex scenarios, then watch through the security feeds as Sage encountered and solved each challenge with the same unflappable competence. They never seemed surprised by the obstacles, never questioned why the executive floor had suddenly become so prone to mysterious accidents. It was during the third week of this routine that Marcus made his first real mistake. He'd been watching the feeds for so long that the rest of his life had become background noise. Board meetings happened around him while he studied Sage's cleaning patterns on his phone. Conference calls blurred into white noise as he analyzed the way Sage moved through the office spaces, noting the slight favor they showed their left leg and the way they paused sometimes to stretch their lower back. Marcus was losing weight, but it wasn't from the wolfsbane anymore. He'd stopped taking it entirely, relying instead on the herbal teas that appeared nightly on his desk. His appetite was returning, but he forgot to eat, too absorbed in his observation project to remember basic human needs. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent months poisoning himself to stay human, and now he was starving himself to watch the person who'd saved him. It was 2:30 a.m. on a Thursday when everything changed. Marcus was deep in the security feeds, watching Sage work through the corner offices, when movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. His own office door was opening, but Sage was clearly visible on camera 3 floors away, emptying a trash can and accounting. Marcus spun in his chair and found himself face to face with 2 men in expensive suits who moved like they knew how to handle themselves. The larger one had scarring across his knuckles that spoke to a lifetime of violence. The smaller one smiled like a shark. "Mr. Blackwood," the smaller man said, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk without invitation. "We need to talk." Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his desk drawer, where he kept a .38 that Helena had never known about. The larger man stepped forward, shaking his head. "About our mutual friend Sage Chin," the shark continued conversationally. "You see, they owe us money. Quite a lot of money, actually. And we've been having some difficulty collecting." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of Sage's careful movements, the way they handled expensive items with such respect, the professional competence that went far beyond cleaning services. "They've been very clever," the man was saying. "New identity, new job, new city. But people always surface eventually, don't they? And when we found out our little rabbit had found themselves a very wealthy protector." He gestured around Marcus's office. "Well, that opens up some interesting possibilities." Marcus stood slowly, and both men tensed. Even weakened by months of self-abuse, he was still dangerous. Still predatory in ways they probably couldn't imagine. "Get out," Marcus said quietly. The shark's smile widened. "I don't think you understand the situation, Mr. Blackwood. Your cleaning lady owes us $200,000. Plus interest. Plus penalties for making us chase her across 3 states. We're willing to accept payment from any source." "Get out," Marcus repeated, and this time his voice carried something that made the larger man take a step back. But the shark was either braver or stupider than his partner. He leaned forward, eyes glittering. "We know about your divorce, Marcus. About the custody battle. About all those nasty rumors regarding your anger management issues. Imagine how the press would react to stories about you threatening innocent businessmen. How would that look to the judge overseeing your parental rights case?" Marcus went very still. The wolf in his chest, quiet for weeks thanks to Sage's teas, began to stir. "Of course," the shark continued, "if the debt were paid, we'd have no reason to contact anyone. We're very discreet that way." The security feed on Marcus's laptop showed Sage stepping into the executive elevator, cleaning cart in tow. They'd be here in less than 5 minutes. Marcus looked at the 2 men in his office, then at the screen showing Sage's approach. Possessiveness rose in his throat like bile. Not protective instinct, that would have been noble. This was something darker. Sage was his to watch, his to study, his puzzle to solve. No one else got to threaten them. "How much?" Marcus asked. $250, the shark said immediately. Cash. Tonight. Marcus opened his laptop and began typing. The men watched as he transferred funds, their eyes reflecting the screen's glow. When he finished, he turned the laptop so they could see the transaction confirmation. It's done, he said. Now get out. The shark stood, straightening his tie. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm sure Ms. Chen will be very grateful for your generosity. They were gone before the elevator reached the executive floor. Marcus watched the security feed as Sage emerged into the hallway, same bored expression, same mechanical efficiency. They had no idea how close they'd come to disaster. No idea that their carefully constructed new life had been compromised, or that Marcus had just bought their freedom for $250,000. The realization should have troubled him. Instead, Marcus felt a dark satisfaction settle into his bones. Sage belonged to him now in ways they couldn't even comprehend. The debt was paid, but the leverage remained. They were safe, but only because he'd made them safe. Only because he'd chosen to protect his entertainment. Marcus settled back in his chair and returned his attention to the security feeds. Sage was working through the cubicles now, unaware they were being watched, unaware they'd been saved. The tea would appear on his desk within the hour, chamomile tonight, he thought, based on the pattern he'd observed. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, package delivered as requested. Marcus frowned and checked his security feeds again. Sage was still visible, working steadily through the office space. But somehow, impossibly, there was a small package sitting on his desk that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Inside was a small glass vial filled with clear liquid, and a note in Sage's precise handwriting, in case you decide to start poisoning yourself again. This one's faster. Marcus stared at the vial, then at the security feed showing Sage calmly emptying trash cans 300 feet away. They'd known. Somehow, they'd known about the loan sharks, about the threat, about his intervention. And instead of gratitude, they'd left him poison. For the first time in months, Marcus laughed. Really laughed, the sound echoing off his office walls. His entertainment was far more interesting than he'd realized. He was still laughing when Sage appeared in his office doorway an hour later, leaning against the frame with their arms crossed. Evening, boss, Sage said casually. Thought you might want to know, someone's been messing with your security system. Deleting footage, editing timestamps. You should probably have IT look into that. Marcus studied their face, looking for any sign of gratitude or acknowledgement of what he'd done. Sage's expression remained neutral, almost bored. Anything else? Marcus asked. Yeah. Sage pushed off from the doorframe and walked to his desk, picking up the empty tea mug from the night before. Next time you want to play hero, maybe ask first. Some of us prefer to handle our own problems. They turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? The cameras in the supply closet have been broken for 2 weeks. Just in case you were wondering how I'd been making your tea. Sage left, taking the empty mug with them, and Marcus was alone with the growing realization that he'd been outplayed from the very beginning. The tea hadn't been kindness or medical intervention. It had been strategy. Sage had needed him healthy enough to be useful, alert enough to be manipulated. Every obstacle he'd left, every test he'd designed, Sage had known exactly what he was doing and why. Marcus picked up the vial of poison and held it up to the light. Clear, odorless, probably tasteless. Professional grade. The kind of thing you acquired through very specific channels. His cleaning lady wasn't running from loan sharks. Sage Chen was far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Marcus set down the vial and opened his laptop, pulling up personnel files he shouldn't have had access to. Sage's employment record was thin, too clean, the kind of background that screamed professional construction. But there were inconsistencies if you knew what to look for. Skills that didn't match the resume. References that were too perfect. The wolf in his chest stirred again, but this time it wasn't responding to threat or territory. This was recognition. Predator acknowledging predator. Marcus smiled and began to type, digging deeper into Sage Chen's carefully constructed identity. If they wanted to play games, he was more than happy to participate. After all, he had resources they couldn't imagine, and patience that came from having nothing left to lose. The hunt was back on. But this time, Marcus wasn't entirely sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. Outside his office windows, Seattle slept on, unaware that in a glass tower downtown, two damaged people had just begun a dance that would either save them both or destroy everything in their path. Marcus was looking forward to finding out which. Chapter 3. Marcus spent 3 days trying to crack Sage's identity before he realized he was approaching it all wrong. He'd been thinking like a businessman, following paper trails, financial records, employment histories. But Sage Chen wasn't a business problem. They were something else entirely, something that moved through official channels like smoke through water, leaving just enough traces to seem legitimate while revealing nothing real. It wasn't until Marcus found himself standing in his office at 4 a.m., staring at security footage of Sage neutralizing a chemical spill with the efficiency of a hazmat specialist, that the pieces began clicking into place. The way they moved. The knowledge they displayed. The complete lack of fear when confronted with dangerous situations. Sage wasn't running from loan sharks. They were running from something much worse. Marcus was still puzzling through the implications when his office door opened without so much as a courtesy knock. Sage walked in carrying a steaming mug and a stack of files, looking as unimpressed with his brooding as ever. "Coffee," Sage said, setting the mug on his desk. "Real coffee this time, not that herbal shit. You look like you need the caffeine." Marcus studied their face, looking for any crack in the casual facade. "How did you get past building security?" I asked nicely. Sage settled into the chair across from his desk and began organizing the files with methodical precision. "Besides, your night guy owes me money. Poker isn't really his game. You've been gambling with my security staff." "I've been winning money from your security staff," Sage corrected. "There's a difference. Tony's gotta tell when he bluffs, he touches his left ear. Might want to mention that if you ever play cards with him." Marcus picked up the coffee and took a cautious sip. It was perfect, strong enough to strip paint, but with an underlying smoothness that spoke to expensive beans and careful brewing. Nothing like the industrial sludge most cleaning crews subsisted on. "You're not a janitor," Marcus said. Sage didn't look up from the files they were sorting. "No shit, Sherlock. What gave it away? The fact that I can make decent coffee, or the fact that I've been keeping your sorry ass alive for the past month? The fact that you neutralized a Class 3 chemical spill using supplies from a cleaning cart?" That made Sage pause. They glanced up, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something flicker behind their dark eyes. Not fear, exactly, but calculation. "Maybe I'm just well trained," Sage said. "Or maybe you're something else entirely." Sage set down the files and leaned back in their chair, studying Marcus with the same intense focus he'd been directing at them for weeks. The silence stretched between them, pregnant with possibilities and threats neither was quite ready to voice. "You know," Sage said finally, "for a guy who's supposed to be some kind of apex predator, you're remarkably slow on the uptake." The casual admission hit Marcus like a physical blow. He set down his coffee with carefully controlled movements, his enhanced hearing picking up the slight acceleration of his own heartbeat. "You know what I am. I've known what you are since the night I found you chained to your desk like some kind of BDSM enthusiast with commitment issues," Sage said. "The silver burns were a dead giveaway. Plus, you smell like wet dog when you're stressed." Marcus felt the wolf in his chest stir, responding to what it interpreted as a challenge. But something was wrong. The usual surge of territorial aggression he felt when humans discovered his nature was muted. Dampened, like someone had thrown a wet blanket over a fire. "Interesting," Sage murmured, watching his face. "You're trying to shift right now, aren't you? How's that working out for you?" Marcus concentrated, reaching for the familiar heat that preceded transformation. Nothing happened. The wolf was there, he could feel it pacing behind his ribs, but it was trapped, contained by something he couldn't identify. "What did you do to me?" Marcus asked quietly. Nothing you didn't ask for. Sage picked up one of the files and began flipping through it. You wanted to be human, remember? You were poisoning yourself to stay in control. I just found a more sustainable solution. The tea. Among other things. Sage pulled out a photograph and held it up. Marcus recognized it immediately, a surveillance shot of him mid-shift, taken during the custody hearing. His wolf form was massive, easily twice the size of a normal werewolf, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. Helena really did a number on you, didn't she? Sage said, studying the photo with professional detachment. Impressive transformation. I'd estimate you're 90% larger than the average alpha? That level of size increase suggests either exceptional bloodline purity or... They looked up at Marcus, tilting their head. You're not just any werewolf, are you? You're one of those old blood alphas. The kind that can tear through a dozen betas without breaking a sweat. Marcus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Thought so. Sage set down the photograph and picked up another file. Which makes this whole situation infinitely more interesting. See, Marcus, I have a very specific skill set. And that skill set is designed for dealing with exactly your type. And what type is that? Sage smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met them, the expression held no warmth whatsoever. The dangerous kind. They opened the file they'd been holding and began reading from it in a conversational tone, as if they were discussing the weather. Supernatural Regulatory Committee Classification, Omega Void, Designation 7743. Specialized training in alpha suppression and neutralization. Combat effectiveness rating, exceptional. Confirmed kills. Sage paused, running their finger down the page. Well, that number's a bit out of date. Let's just say it's north of 20. The words hit Marcus like ice water. He'd heard rumors of void omegas, supernatural weapons bred and trained in underground facilities, designed to be the perfect counter to alpha dominance. He'd always assumed they were myths, boogeyman stories told to keep powerful alphas in line. You're lying, Marcus said. Am I? Sage closed the file and leaned forward, suddenly all business. Tell me, Marcus, when's the last time you successfully shifted? When's the last time you felt that lovely surge of alpha dominance that makes humans cower and other wolves submit? Because I'm betting it's been about 3 weeks. Right around the time I started making your tea. Marcus tried to call up his wolf again, straining against whatever was holding it back. The effort left him dizzy and nauseous, like trying to lift weights that were far too heavy. The herbs in the tea aren't just counteracting the wolfsbane, Sage continued. They're suppressing your entire supernatural nature. Not permanently, I'm not that cruel, but effectively enough to keep you manageable. Why? Marcus managed. Because I needed you functional but not dangerous. See, I had a problem, and that problem required a very specific type of solution. Namely, a rich, powerful alpha with resources and connections. Sage stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline with their hands clasped behind their back. The loan sharks were a convenient fiction, they said. The truth is considerably messier. 3 months ago, I was working for an organization that specialized in supernatural entertainment. Underground fighting rings, specifically. Alphas would pay enormous sums to watch other supernaturals tear each other apart in controlled environments. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And you were. I was the house advantage, Sage said simply. When the fights got too one-sided, when the paying customers were losing interest, they'd send me in. Little Omega who could take down alphas 3 times their size. The crowds loved it, David and Goliath, except Goliath usually ended up in pieces. They turned away from the window, and Marcus saw something in their expression that made his enhanced predator instinct scream warnings his conscious mind couldn't quite process. I was very good at my job, Sage continued. Too good, as it turned out. The handlers got greedy, started booking more matches than my body could handle. Started using chemical enhancers to push my abilities beyond safe limits. When I told them I needed a break, they reminded me that I didn't actually have a choice in the matter. So you left. Sage laughed, but the sound held no humor. I burned the entire facility to the ground. 17 people died in that fire, Marcus. Handlers, guards, a few unlucky spectators who couldn't find the exits fast enough. The only supernaturals who died were the ones too injured to run. Marcus stared at them, trying to reconcile this casual admission of mass murder with the person who'd been leaving him carefully brewed tea and organizing his files. You're a terrorist, he said. I'm a survivor, Sage corrected. There's a difference. Though I'll admit the distinction is probably lost on the Supernatural Regulatory Committee. They've classified me as a Class A threat and put a kill order on my head. Shoot on sight, no questions asked. And you thought hiding here would help? I thought having a powerful alpha in my debt might provide some useful leverage, Sage said. Rich guys have lawyers, connections, influence. All things that could potentially make my little problem go away. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Sage had told him. The casual way they'd admitted to multiple murders. Their matter-of-fact description of their training and abilities. The fact that they'd been systematically suppressing his powers for weeks while he'd thought he was watching them. The tea, he said finally. How long before the effects wear off? Depends on your metabolism. Could be hours, could be days. Why? Sage's eyes narrowed. Having second thoughts about our arrangement? I'm having thoughts about a lot of things. Marcus stood slowly, testing the limits of his suppressed abilities. The wolf was still trapped, but he could feel it beginning to stir more actively. For instance, I'm thinking about how you've spent weeks studying me, learning my routines, identifying my weaknesses. Occupational hazard, Sage said with a shrug. I'm also thinking about how you could have killed me a dozen times over if you'd wanted to. True. And I'm wondering why you didn't. For the first time since they'd started this conversation, Sage looked genuinely surprised by the question. Because I needed you alive, they said. A dead alpha can't provide protection or resources. No, Marcus said, taking a step closer. I think it's because you recognized something in me. Something familiar. Sage backed toward the door, but their retreat was casual, calculated. Not fear, tactical positioning. And what would that be? They asked. Another monster. The words hung between them like a challenge. Marcus could smell the shift in the air, not fear, but anticipation. Recognition. You want to know why Helena was able to destroy me so completely? Marcus continued, closing the distance between them. It wasn't just because she exposed what I am. It was because she proved I'd never been in control to begin with. Every business deal, every relationship, every moment of my adult life, it was all built on the threat of violence. On other people's fear of what I might do if they crossed me. He was close enough now to see the flecks of gold in Sage's dark eyes, close enough to catch their scent under the industrial soap and coffee. Something wild and sharp that made his suppressed wolf pace restlessly. She took away my mask, Marcus said quietly. Showed the world exactly what I've always been. A predator who learned to wear a suit and pretend at civilization. And that bothers you? It should, Marcus said. But it doesn't. You know what bothers me? The fact that I spent 3 months trying to poison the wolf because I thought it made me weak. When the truth is, the wolf was the only honest part of me left. Sage was pressed against the office door now, but their posture remained relaxed, ready. As if they were simply waiting to see what Marcus would do next. The custody hearing, Marcus continued. When I shifted in front of all those people, I wasn't out of control. I was finally, completely myself for the first time in years. And Helena knew that. She knew I'd never been more dangerous than when I was pretending to be human. Interesting psychological insight, Sage said. Are you going somewhere with this? Marcus smiled, and for the first time in months, the expression felt genuine. I'm going toward the understanding that you and I aren't so different, he said. You were trained to kill alphas. I was born to dominate everything around me. We're both weapons that learn to disguise ourselves as people. And that's supposed to be romantic? That's supposed to be honest. Marcus's phone buzzed against his desk. Then buzzed again. And again. Sage glanced toward the sound, and something in their expression shifted. Not fear, but alertness. The kind of hyper-awareness that came from a lifetime of being hunted. You should answer that, Sage said quietly. Marcus retrieved his phone and read the messages. His blood went cold. Unknown number, Mr. Blackwood, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the Supernatural Regulatory Committee. We need to discuss your recent activities. Unknown number, we have reason to believe you may be harboring a Class A threat. Cooperation with our investigation would be advisable. Unknown number, will be at your office within the hour. Please ensure you're available to meet. Marcus looked up to find Sage watching him with an expression of grim satisfaction. Let me guess, Sage said. The SRC wants to chat. How did you? Because Helena didn't just destroy your life for revenge, Marcus. She did it because someone paid her to. The Supernatural Regulatory Committee has been looking for me for 3 months, and they finally figured out where I've been hiding. Marcus felt the wolf surge against its chemical restraints, responding to the threat. This time, he felt something give way, not complete freedom, but enough to remind him what power felt like. They can't just walk in here, he said. I have rights. You have rights as long as they consider you a stable member of supernatural society, Sage interrupted. But Helena's been feeding them evidence that you're going feral. The custody hearing footage, medical records showing your wolfsbane abuse, testimonies from your board members about your violent episodes. Marcus's phone rang. Helena's number. Answer it, Sage said. She'll want to gloat. Marcus accepted the call and put it on speaker. Hello, Marcus. Helena's voice was warm, conversational. The same tone she'd used when they were married, when he'd foolishly believed she loved him despite knowing what he was. I hope you've been taking care of yourself. What do you want, Helena? I want you to know that everything that's about to happen is for Lily's protection. And for the protection of everyone else you might hurt. I haven't hurt anyone. Haven't you? Helena's voice hardened. What about your board members? Your staff? The security guards who've been too afraid to enter your office after dark? You've been spiraling for months, Marcus. Everyone can see it. Marcus looked at Sage, who was listening with professional detachment. The SRC agents are very reasonable people, Helena continued. They understand that feral wolves can't help their nature. The process will be quick, painless. Much more humane than what you've been doing to yourself. Process? Termination, Marcus. They're coming to put you down. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, processing what Helena had just told him. The Supernatural Regulatory Committee wasn't coming to investigate. They were coming to execute him. Well, Sage said conversationally, this is awkward. Awkward? They're here for both of us now. Kill order on me, termination warrant for you. We're both officially too dangerous to live. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not just the wolf, though he could feel his abilities starting to return as the herbal suppressants weakened, but something else. A recognition that everything he'd thought he understood about his situation had just changed. What do you suggest we do about it? He asked. Sage smiled, and this time there was nothing casual about the expression. It was the smile of someone who'd spent their entire life being underestimated, and who was finally tired of pretending to be harmless. Well, Sage said, we could run. Find somewhere to hide, hope they eventually lose interest. Or we could remind them why they were afraid of us in the first place. Marcus felt the wolf surge again, stronger this time. The chemical restraints were definitely weakening, and with them, his ability to pretend he was anything other than what he'd always been. A predator. A weapon. A monster who'd learned to wear a suit. I like the second option, Marcus said. I thought you might. Sage pushed away from the door and walked to the window. They'll be here in 45 minutes. Probably a full tactical team. SRC doesn't take chances with Class A threats. silver weapons, specialized containment equipment, maybe even a few tame alphas for backup. And you think we can take them? Sage turned back to him, and Marcus saw something in their eyes that made his suppressed predator instinct sing with recognition. Marcus, Sage said quietly, I've killed 17 people and burned down a building full of supernaturals who thought they owned me. You've spent your entire adult life pretending to be civilized when you're actually one of the most dangerous alphas on the West Coast. They walked to his desk and picked up the small vial of poison they'd left him nights ago. The question isn't whether we can take them, Sage continued, uncapping the vial and pouring its contents into the potted plant by the window. The question is whether we want to. Marcus watched the plant immediately begin to wither and realized that Sage had been carrying around something lethal enough to kill him in seconds. Had been carrying it for days while organizing his files and making his coffee. Why didn't you use it? He asked. Because dead alphas are boring, Sage said. And I've spent too many years being bored. The building's fire alarm began to sound, not the steady tone of a drill, but the sharp, urgent pattern that indicated real emergency. Through the window, Marcus could see black SUVs pulling into the parking garage. They're early, Sage observed. Rude, but not unexpected. Marcus felt the last of the chemical suppressants fade from his system. The wolf unfurled in his chest like a flower opening to sunlight, and for the first time in months, he felt completely, dangerously alive. So, he said, beginning to loosen his tie. What's the plan? Sage walked to his office door and flipped the deadbolt, then began pushing furniture against it. The plan, Sage said, is to show them exactly why they should have left us alone. Marcus smiled and began unbuttoning his shirt. Outside, he could hear the sound of tactical teams moving through the building, getting closer. The hunt was about to begin. And this time, Marcus wasn't going to be the prey. Chapter 4. The first SRC operative made it exactly 12 steps into Marcus's office before Sage killed him. Marcus was still mid-transformation when the door exploded inward, sending chunks of mahogany and steel flying across the room. The operative came through the breach already firing, silver-netted projectiles that would have wrapped around a normal supernatural and delivered enough voltage to drop an elephant. Sage moved like liquid mercury, flowing around the nets with inhuman grace. By the time the operative realized his shots had missed, Sage was already inside his guard, pressing something small and sharp against his neck. Sorry about this, Sage said conversationally, but you really should have knocked. The operative dropped like a stone, silver blood frothing from his mouth. Sage calmly wiped their hands on the dead man's tactical vest and turned to survey Marcus's progress. That's new, Sage observed, watching Marcus complete his shift. You're bigger than in the photos. Marcus tested his new form, feeling muscles and bones settle into configurations that shouldn't have been possible. He was massive, easily 9 feet tall at the shoulder, with claws that could shred steel and teeth designed for tearing through armor. The months of chemical suppression had left him smaller, weaker. Now, fully unleashed, he was something that belonged in nightmares. The suppressants were holding back more than just my abilities, Marcus growled, his voice a bass rumble that made the office windows vibrate. They were keeping me from reaching full maturity. Fascinating. We'll discuss the implications later. Sage picked up the dead operative's weapon and examined it with professional interest. Right now we have bigger problems. That was just the advanced scout. As if summoned by their words, the building's emergency lighting cut out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red light that made the blood pooling around the dead operative look black. They've taken the building, Sage said, checking the weapon's ammunition. Standard SRC protocol: cut power, seal exits, work floor by floor until they find their targets. Marcus padded to the window and looked down. The parking garage was full of black vehicles, and he could see tactical teams moving through the lobby with military precision. Silver weapons glinted under the emergency lighting. How many? He asked. Full suppression team. Probably 40 operatives, plus command staff and a cleanup crew. Sage was methodically going through the dead man's equipment. They're not taking any chances with us. Good, Marcus said, and meant it. For the first time in months, he felt like himself. Not the broken businessman drowning in self-pity, not the desperate father clinging to false hope. He was apex predator, and these people had made the mistake of cornering him. The elevator dinged softly in the hallway outside. "Showtime," Sage murmured, moving to the side of the destroyed doorway. 3 more operatives came through in formation, silver weapons raised. Marcus hit the first one head-on, claws tearing through tactical armor like tissue paper. The man's scream cut off abruptly as Marcus's jaws closed around his throat. The second operative managed to get off a shot, a silver-core bullet that would have been lethal to most werewolves. It lodged somewhere in Marcus's shoulder, burning like molten metal, but didn't slow him down. He backhanded the shooter hard enough to send him flying across the hallway. The third operative was trying to call for backup when Sage appeared behind him like a shadow. There was a soft whisper of steel, and suddenly the man was clutching his throat while blood fountained between his fingers. "Oops," Sage said, watching the operative collapse. "Arterial spray on the quarterly reports. Accounting's going to hate cleaning that up." Marcus stared at them, still processing the casual way Sage had just committed murder. The Void Omega was wiping their blade clean on the dead man's uniform, looking as unruffled as if they'd just filed paperwork. "You're enjoying this," Marcus realized. "I'm good at this," Sage corrected. "There's a difference." "Well, mostly." The building's intercom crackled to life, filling the office with static before a crisp female voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Agent Martinez with the Supernatural Regulatory Committee. We know you're listening." Marcus padded back to his desk and hit the intercom button with one massive claw. "I'm here. We're not your enemy, Mr. Blackwood. We're here to help. Your ex-wife provided us with medical evidence that you've been suffering from supernatural rabies, a synthetic strain designed specifically for lycanthropes. Without immediate treatment, the condition is fatal." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the silver bullet lodged in his shoulder. What? The paranoia, the aggression, the self-isolation, these are all symptoms of advanced rabies infection. Your behavior over the past several months matches the clinical progression perfectly. Sage looked up from where they were collecting weapons from the dead operatives. "Well," they said quietly, "that's interesting. We're prepared to offer full medical treatment," Agent Martinez continued, "but we need you to surrender immediately. Every minute you remain untreated increases the risk of permanent neurological damage." Marcus's mind raced. The symptoms fit, the increasing paranoia, the violent episodes with his board members, the way he'd isolated himself in his office. But supernatural rabies was supposed to be extinct, eliminated decades ago by international treaty. "Helena," he growled. "Helena Blackwood has been working with our medical team to document your condition," Martinez confirmed. "She's provided extensive evidence of your deteriorating mental state, including video footage and medical records." "Marcus," Sage said quietly, "we need to move. They're stalling while teams position themselves on this floor." But Marcus was caught in the implications of what Martinez had said. Helena hadn't just destroyed his life, she'd been systematically poisoning him. The strange tiredness that had started months before their divorce. The increasingly violent dreams. The way his temper had become harder and harder to control. "The coffee," Marcus said suddenly. "She always brought me coffee in the mornings. Said it was a sign of affection." Sage's expression darkened. Synthetic rabies requires consistent dosing over months to take hold. Classic poisoning protocol. The intercom crackled again. "Mr. Blackwood, we're running out of time. Our medical team needs to begin treatment immediately." "You know what the treatment is, don't you?" Sage asked, still gathering equipment from the dead operatives. Marcus did know. Supernatural rabies was too aggressive for conventional medicine. The only effective treatment was immediate termination followed by complete incineration to prevent spread. There was no cure. There never had been. "They're not here to save me," Marcus said. "No," Sage agreed. "They're here to clean up Helena's mess. Can't have a prominent businessman dying of extinct supernatural diseases, raises too many questions about where he might have contracted it. The sound of tactical boots echoed from the stairwell. They were running out of time. So what's the plan? Marcus asked. Sage slung a silver-core rifle across their back and checked the load on a tranquilizer gun. The plan is we kill everyone in this building and then have a very serious conversation with your ex-wife. All of them? Marcus, they came here to murder us both and make it look like a mercy killing. I don't really see room for negotiation. The first team hit the executive floor with military precision, moving through the cubicles in formation. Marcus could hear them calling out positions, coordinating their advance. Professional. Thorough. Utterly unprepared for what they were about to face. Sage moved first, slipping out of the office like a ghost and disappearing into the maze of cubicles. Marcus gave them a 30-second head start, then followed. The executive floor had been designed with an open floor plan, great for collaboration, terrible for providing cover during firefights. Marcus used this to his advantage, moving through the space like a force of nature. His claws found throats and arteries with surgical precision, while his enhanced hearing tracked the remaining operatives by their heartbeats and panicked breathing. Sage worked differently, silent, efficient, leaving bodies that looked like they'd simply fallen asleep until you noticed the thin lines of blood at their throats. They moved through the tactical formation like a virus, killing from within while the operatives tried desperately to locate their attacker. Contact. I have contact. The shout came from near the elevators, followed immediately by automatic weapons fire. Marcus bounded across the cubicles, leaping over partition walls to land directly on top of the shooter. The operative's weapon clattered away as Marcus's weight drove him to the ground. Wait, the man gasped, I have information about your daughter. Marcus tore his throat out before he could finish the sentence. Bit trigger-happy there, Sage observed, appearing beside the body. He might have been useful. He was lying, Marcus said. Helena made sure I'd never see Lily again. Anyone claiming otherwise is just trying to manipulate me. Fair point. Sage appropriated the dead operative's radio and listened to the chatter. They're regrouping on 15. Looks like they're bringing up heavy weapons. Heavy weapons? Silver core explosives, probably. Designed to bring down the entire floor if necessary. Sage paused, tilting their head. Oh, that's interesting. They're not just planning to kill us, they're planning to destroy all evidence we were ever here. Marcus felt rage surge through him, hot and clean. Helena hadn't just tried to murder him. She'd tried to erase him completely, leaving no trace that he'd ever existed except for carefully crafted medical records showing a tragic decline into madness. The stairwell, Marcus said. If they're regrouping below us, we take the fight to them, Sage finished. I like the way you think. They made their way to the stairwell, stepping over bodies and pooling blood. The emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and shadow, making the scene look like something out of a particularly violent Renaissance painting. You know, Sage said conversationally as they descended, this is probably the most fun I've had since burning down that fighting ring. You're insane, Marcus said. Says the 9-foot werewolf with anger management issues. Sage paused at the landing for the 15th floor. Besides, sanity's overrated. Sane people don't survive what we've survived. They could hear voices through the stairwell door, tactical planning, coordinated movements. At least a dozen operatives, maybe more. Ready? Sage asked, hand on the door handle. Marcus tested his claws against the concrete wall, leaving deep gouges in the reinforced material. The silver bullet in his shoulder was still burning, but the pain only sharpened his focus. Ready, he said. Sage threw open the door and immediately rolled left as silver bullets sprayed the doorway. Marcus came through right behind them, using his bulk to scatter the formation. Claws met flesh, teeth found bone, and suddenly the orderly tactical advance became a slaughter. An operative tried to put a silver net over Marcus's head. Sage appeared behind the man and opened his throat with casual efficiency. Net's a nice try, Sage said, stepping over the body, but you really need to account for the size differential. What works on a regular werewolf doesn't necessarily work on whatever the hell Marcus has become. Another operative managed to get a clear shot with a tranquilizer gun. The dart caught Marcus in the ribs, and he felt synthetic sedatives flood his system. Instead of dropping, he turned toward the shooter with renewed fury. "Ooh, bad choice," Sage observed, watching Marcus tear the operative in half. "Sedatives just make him grumpy." The radio chatter was becoming increasingly frantic. Teams 7 and 8, report. "We've lost contact with." Sage picked up a fallen radio and keyed the mic. "This is Team 7, they said in a perfect imitation of one of the dead operatives. "Targets neutralized. Moving to extract." "Copy that, 7. Return to staging area for debriefing." Sage grinned at Marcus. "Want to crash their party?" The staging area was in the building's main conference room, where a dozen support staff and command personnel were coordinating the operation. They looked up expectantly as Marcus and Sage walked through the door, then stared in horror as they realized what they were seeing. "Good evening," Sage said pleasantly, surveying the room. "We're here about the wrongful termination case." What followed wasn't a fight so much as an execution. The support staff were civilians, equipped with radios and tablets rather than weapons. They died quickly, efficiently, some still reaching for their phones to call for help that would never come. Marcus found Agent Martinez huddled behind an overturned table, trying frantically to establish radio contact with teams that no longer existed. "Martinez," Marcus said, his voice a rumbling growl that made the windows vibrate. She looked up at him with a mixture of fear and professional determination. "Mr. Blackwood. You need medical attention." "The rabies." "There is no rabies," Marcus said quietly. "Helena poisoned me with something designed to mimic the symptoms." "You knew that. You all knew that." Martinez's expression shifted, and Marcus saw the moment she realized there was no point in maintaining the fiction. "The synthetic compound was supposed to be undetectable," she said. "Helena assured us it would look like natural progression." "Supposed to be?" "The dosage was too high." She got impatient, wanted faster results. "The compound started breaking down, leaving metabolic traces our medical team could identify." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. "So you decided to clean up the mess by killing me and destroying the evidence." "You were dying anyway," Martinez said defensively. "The neurological damage was irreversible. We were offering mercy." "Bullshit," Sage said, appearing beside Marcus with blood on their hands. "You were covering up an attempted murder because Helena's connected to people you can't afford to cross." Martinez said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "Who is she working for?" Marcus asked. "I can't." Marcus reached down and lifted Martinez off the floor with one massive claw, bringing her face level with his own. "Who is Helena working for?" "The consortium," Martinez gasped. "She's been feeding them information about high-profile supernaturals for years. Your case file, your business connections, everything." "The consortium." Marcus had heard rumors, a shadow organization that supposedly controlled supernatural politics from behind the scenes. Old families, older money, the kind of power that could make entire government agencies disappear. "They wanted me dead?" "They wanted you controlled," Martinez said. "Helena was supposed to use the custody battle to keep you manageable. When that didn't work, she escalated to more permanent solutions." Marcus set Martinez down carefully, then stepped back. "Sage. On it." Sage moved like lightning, and Martinez was dead before she hit the ground. Marcus looked around the conference room, taking in the bodies and blood that painted the walls. In the space of an hour, they'd killed nearly 40 federal agents and destroyed any evidence of the SRC's involvement in Helena's assassination attempt. "This is going to cause problems," Marcus said. "Everything causes problems," Sage replied, wiping their blade clean. "The question is whether we're going to let other people's problems become our problems." Marcus considered this as he shifted back to human form, muscles and bones reshaping themselves with sounds that shouldn't have been possible. The silver bullet worked its way out of his shoulder and clattered to the floor. "Helena," he said finally. Helena, Sage agreed. And probably this consortium she's working for. Marcus retrieved his clothes from where he'd left them in his office, dressing methodically while he thought through their next moves. The building was secure, for now. But eventually someone would come looking for the missing SRC team. We need to disappear, he said. We need to attack, Sage corrected. Helena tried to murder you and frame it as a mercy killing. The consortium used federal agents as their personal assassination squad. You really want to spend the rest of your life running from these people? Marcus considered this as he buttoned his shirt. The old Marcus, the businessman who'd spent years pretending to be civilized, would have chosen to run. Would have used his resources to disappear somewhere safe and quiet. But the old Marcus was dead, murdered by his ex-wife and buried under months of chemical torture. The new Marcus was something different. Something that had just torn through 40 trained operatives without breaking a sweat. What did you have in mind? He asked. Sage smiled, and the expression was sharp enough to cut glass. I think, Sage said, it's time we paid Helena a visit. Outside the conference room windows, Seattle slept on, unaware that in a glass tower downtown, two monsters had just declared war on the forces that had tried to destroy them. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. And this time, Marcus and Sage would be the ones setting the terms. Chapter 5. Marcus was still pulling on his jacket when the elevator chimed softly in the hallway beyond the conference room's blood-spattered walls. That's impossible, he said, checking his watch. Building security should have locked down all access points. Sage looked up from where they were methodically wiping fingerprints off weapons, their expression shifting from casual efficiency to something resembling actual concern. Unless whoever's coming has override codes, Sage said quietly. The kind of access that comes from very high clearance levels. The elevator doors opened with a soft whisper, and three figures stepped into the hallway. Marcus recognized Helena immediately, still beautiful, still poised, still carrying herself with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted her own superiority. The man beside her was tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite disguise the predatory grace of his movements. The third figure made Marcus's world tilt sideways. Lily, he breathed. His daughter looked exactly like Helena, but with his eyes, the same dark gold that had marked the Blackwood line for generations. She was taller than he remembered, moving with a fluid precision that spoke to years of careful training. When she looked at him through the conference room's glass walls, her expression held no warmth, no recognition, no trace of the little girl who'd once climbed into his lap to hear bedtime stories. She looked at him like he was a monster. Hello, son, the silver-haired man said, his voice carrying easily through the building's intercom system. It's been a long time. Marcus felt the world drop out from under him. That voice, he'd heard it in nightmares for 15 years, ever since the car accident that had supposedly claimed his father's life. Ever since the day Marcus had inherited a business empire and the crushing weight of expectations he'd never asked for. You're dead, Marcus said into the nearest intercom pickup. Death is such a limiting concept, his father replied. I prefer to think of it as a strategic withdrawal from public life. Though I must say, watching you build on my foundation has been educational. Helena stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice held the same warm affection it had carried throughout their marriage. The tone that had once made Marcus feel like the luckiest man alive now made his skin crawl. Marcus, darling, you look terrible. All that violence really isn't good for your complexion. Fascinating family dynamic, Sage murmured beside him. Very Norman Rockwell meets American Psycho. Through the intercom, Marcus heard his father chuckle. And you must be the infamous Sage Chen. Dr. Vex has told me so much about you. A fourth figure emerged from the elevator, a thin man in a lab coat who moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to handling dangerous specimens. When he saw Sage through the conference room windows, his face lit up with the kind of joy usually reserved for Christmas morning. There's my favorite project, Dr. Vex said, his voice carrying an unsettling note of paternal pride. You've grown since our last session. Sage went very still beside Marcus, and for the first time since he'd known them, they looked genuinely rattled. Great, Sage said flatly. Another family reunion. Where's the poison when you need it? Marcus's father, Aldrich Blackwood, supposedly dead for 15 years, stepped closer to the conference room's entrance. Even through the reinforced glass, Marcus could feel the alpha dominance radiating from him like heat from a forge. It was old power, refined by decades of use, and it made Marcus's own enhanced abilities feel crude by comparison. You've made quite a mess, son, Aldrich observed, surveying the bodies scattered throughout the conference room. Though I must admit, your efficiency has improved significantly since the custody hearing. What do you want? Marcus asked. What I've always wanted. To ensure the Blackwood legacy continues appropriately. Aldrich gestured toward Lily, who remained motionless beside Helena. Your daughter has been receiving an education befitting her heritage. She's quite remarkable, all of your strength, but with proper discipline and focus. Marcus looked at Lily again, noting details he'd missed in his initial shock. The way she stood suggested years of combat training. Her clothes were tailored to allow for unrestricted movement. Most telling of all, she wore a small silver pendant around her neck, the kind of jewelry that would burn any werewolf who tried to touch her. She'd been raised to fight her own kind. What did you do to her? Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a growl that made the conference room windows vibrate. We gave her purpose, Helena said. Something you never could. You were always too weak, too sentimental. Always trying to be human instead of embracing what you really are. She's 7 years old. She's a Blackwood, Aldrich corrected. Age is irrelevant. Power is what matters, and she has more potential than you ever showed at her age. Dr. Vex stepped forward, his attention focused entirely on Sage. I really must thank you for field testing my conditioning protocols so thoroughly. The data you've provided over the years has been invaluable. Conditioning protocols? Marcus looked at Sage, who was staring at Dr. Vex with an expression he couldn't read. Project Null, Dr. Vex explained happily. The perfect anti-alpha weapon. I've spent decades perfecting the neurochemical modifications necessary to create a void omega capable of functioning without emotional interference. Emotional interference, Sage repeated slowly. All those inconvenient feelings that make normal people hesitate during critical moments. Guilt, empathy, attachment, completely unnecessary for a weapon of your caliber. The compound I developed eliminates them entirely, leaving only tactical efficiency and objective focus. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Sage's casual attitude toward violence. Their clinical detachment during murder. The way they discussed their own traumatic past without any visible emotional response. You drugged them, Marcus said. I perfected them, Dr. Vex corrected. Sage was my greatest success, a living weapon capable of killing any alpha regardless of size or power level. And the beautiful part is, they don't even realize they're being controlled. The conditioning feels like their natural personality. Is that true? Marcus asked, turning to Sage. Sage was quiet for a long moment, their expression cycling through something that might have been confusion. I don't know. The memories feel real, but... They touched their temple, frowning. There are gaps. Inconsistencies. Of course there are, Dr. Vex said fondly. Memory modification was essential to the process. Can't have you questioning your conditioning every time you're deployed. Through the intercom, Aldrich's voice cut through the conversation with practiced authority. Enough reminiscing. Marcus, you have a choice to make. Surrender now, accept your proper place in the family hierarchy, and we'll consider allowing Sage to live. Continue this pointless rebellion, and we'll be forced to eliminate both of you. Some choice, Marcus said. There's always a choice, son. The question is whether you're finally ready to stop pretending to be something you're not. Marcus looked at his daughter again, memorizing her face. She was beautiful, deadly, and completely alien to him. Whatever Helena and Aldrich had done to her, the little girl who'd once fallen asleep in his arms was gone. What's the real play here? Marcus asked. This isn't about family legacy or proper hierarchy. What do you actually want? Aldrich smiled, and the expression held genuine pride. There's the strategic thinking I've been waiting to see. You're right, of course. This has never been about family. It's about control. The consortium, Sage said suddenly. You're running the consortium. I am the consortium, Aldrich corrected. Along with a select few others who understand that supernatural society needs guidance. Structure. The kind of leadership that only comes from those with the power to enforce it. Marcus felt the last pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The SRC attack wasn't about covering up Helena's assassination attempt. It was a test. Very good. We needed to know if you were capable of the kind of decisive action our organization requires. Killing 40 federal agents certainly demonstrated your potential. And if I'd failed the test? Then you would have died as planned, and Lily would have inherited your assets along with a valuable lesson about the consequences of weakness. Marcus looked at his daughter one more time, then at Sage, who was still staring at Dr. Vex with dawning horror. Counter-proposal, Marcus said. Go fuck yourselves. The conference room windows exploded inward as Marcus shifted, his transformation faster and more violent than it had ever been. Glass shards scattered across the hallway as he burst through the opening, claws extended, fury giving him speed that defied physics. Aldrich met his charge head-on, his own transformation revealing why he'd been considered the most dangerous alpha of his generation. Father and son collided in the hallway with enough force to crack the reinforced concrete walls. Helena screamed something Marcus couldn't hear over the sound of combat, but Lily moved with cold precision, drawing a silver-bladed knife from her jacket and advancing on the struggling werewolves. That's when Sage entered the fight. They moved through the chaos like a ghost, appearing behind Dr. Vex before the man could react. The doctor's scream cut off abruptly as Sage's blade found his throat. Sorry, Doc, Sage said, watching the man collapse. But I think our therapeutic relationship has run its course. Lily spun toward Sage, silver knife gleaming under the emergency lighting. She was fast, faster than any 7-year-old should have been, but Sage was faster. Hello, little Blackwood, Sage said, catching Lily's wrist and applying just enough pressure to make her drop the knife. You've got good form, but your stance is all wrong. Someone's been teaching you to fight humans, not supernaturals. Let go of me, Lily snarled, and her voice carried an echo of Marcus's alpha dominance. In a minute. First, we need to talk. Marcus slammed his father against the wall hard enough to leave cracks in the concrete. Aldrich was strong, experienced, ruthless, but Marcus was driven by 15 years of suppressed rage and the growing realization that everything he'd believed about his life had been a lie. You killed my mother, Marcus growled, his jaws inches from Aldrich's throat. Cancer killed your mother, Aldrich replied, not even breathing hard despite being pinned by someone twice his size. I simply expedited the process. She was becoming inconveniently sentimental about your upbringing. Marcus felt something snap in his chest. Not physically, emotionally. The last thread connecting him to the person he'd thought he was. You poisoned her. I removed an obstacle. Just as Helena was supposed to remove you when you outlived your usefulness. Supposed to? Aldrich smiled, and the expression was purely predatory. Did you really think Helena came up with the synthetic rabies idea herself? She's ambitious but not particularly creative. I've been guiding her career for years. Marcus tightened his grip, feeling his father's ribs flex under the pressure. Why? Because you were becoming too independent. Too attached to human concepts like morality and restraint. I needed you broken down before you could be rebuilt properly. And if the rebuilding didn't work? Then Lily would inherit everything, and I'd have a granddaughter I could shape from childhood instead of trying to fix the mistakes I made with you. Marcus looked over at his daughter, who was still being held by Sage with careful precision. She was staring at him with naked hatred, her young face twisted into an expression no child should have been capable of. What did you tell her about me? Marcus asked. The truth. That you're a monster who abandoned her when she needed you most. That you chose your own comfort over her safety. That you're weak, sentimental, and unworthy of the Blackwood name. Marcus felt something die in his chest, the last remnant of hope that his family could somehow be salvaged from this nightmare. She believes you. Of course she believes me. I'm the only family she's ever known. Marcus loosened his grip slightly, and Aldrich took the opportunity to break free, flowing backward with inhuman grace. They circled each other in the destroyed hallway, two alphas sizing each other up for what would likely be a fight to the death. You still have a choice, son, Aldrich said conversationally. Join us. Accept your place in the hierarchy. Help us build something lasting. And Sage? Dr. Vex is dead, so the conditioning will start breaking down within days. We'll need to eliminate them before they become unpredictable. Marcus glanced at Sage, who was still holding Lily with careful restraint. Even knowing what he now knew about their chemical conditioning, about the artificial nature of their emotional detachment, Marcus found himself caring about their survival. Which was probably the most human thing he'd felt in months. No deal, Marcus said. Aldrich sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. Helena stepped forward, pulling a small remote from her purse. Marcus, darling, you should know that the building is wired with enough explosives to level 3 city blocks. Insurance purposes, you understand. Tragic accident during renovation. You'd kill your own daughter? Lily isn't in any danger. She has specific training for exactly this scenario. Marcus looked at his daughter again and saw her hand moving towards something at her belt. Not a weapon, a small device that looked suspiciously like a personal teleportation unit. They'd planned for this. All of it. The confrontation, the choice he'd be forced to make, even his refusal to cooperate. How long? Marcus asked. 3 minutes, Helena said, checking her watch. Enough time for final goodbyes, if you're inclined toward sentiment. Sage, Marcus called. We need to go. Working on it, Sage replied, still holding Lily. But I think we have a problem. What kind of problem? Sage looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known them, their expression showed something that might have been actual emotion. Fear, maybe. Or regret. I can't let go of her, Sage said quietly. My hands, they're not responding to my commands. Dr. Vex's voice drifted across the hallway, weak but triumphant. Fail-safe protocol, he gasped, blood frothing from his mouth. Activated when my heart stopped. Sage is now locked onto the highest priority target in the area. Marcus felt ice flood his veins. What does that mean? It means, Aldrich said with obvious satisfaction, that Sage is about to kill your daughter. And there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Sage's grip on Lily tightened fractionally, and Marcus saw a panic flicker across his daughter's face for the first time since she'd arrived. I'm trying to fight it, Sage said through gritted teeth. But the conditioning, it's stronger than I thought. Marcus looked at the scene before him, his daughter trapped by someone he'd come to care about, his father watching with cold satisfaction, his ex-wife counting down to an explosion that would erase all evidence of this confrontation. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. He had to choose, save Sage and let his daughter die, or save his daughter and lose the only person who'd seen him as something other than a monster. The countdown in his head seemed to slow as Marcus realized that everything, absolutely everything, had been orchestrated to bring him to this exact moment. This exact choice. And somehow, he suspected that whatever decision he made would be exactly what Aldrich had been planning for all along. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.